This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.
Good afternoon, bona tarda, from Radio Hadrian, Radio Adria. David and I were taking a much needed break from the weekly broadcasts. They're a lot of work. They're very worthwhile, but they're a huge amount of work which we tend to fit in on our weekends. And whilst we value them and we always appreciate them and we appreciate our audience, we did need a break. While we were taking this break, some terrible events occurred here in Catalonia, within Barcelona and in 3 different places outside of Barcelona. Those events on Thursday, the 17th of August, made us decide to break our respite and do a special broadcast, partly to pay respect to the victims, the deceased, the injured, their families, the emergency workers, the witnesses, all of whom are affected. There's a massive ripple effect from this, because not just the people that were injured or killed, but of course their families, emergency workers, witnesses, and so on and so on and so on. The city was absolutely in chaos yesterday, as you would expect. So we decided to not only break the programme to pay our respects, but also to explore the whole thing a little bit deeper, as you would expect us to do. So first of all, I emphasise that above everything else, I have the utmost sympathy and sadness, and send my condolences to anybody who may happen to be listening to this who is in any way connected with those events yesterday. When we heard the news, we didn't hear this news until late in the afternoon, and there were, as always happens, conflicting reports about what had happened, where it had happened, who was responsible. No, sorry, there weren't conflicting reports about who was responsible, because, as always, every single time within minutes of these things happening, who is blamed? Every single time. Islamic terrorists, or ISIS. ISIS, which we know is not a creation of Islam, has nothing to do with the Quran, but is a concoction of Western governments. The UK government, the US government, Spanish government, and other Western countries have created ISIS for their own end needs. This program is not about ISIS, but we have to mention this because every single time something happens, one of these events happen, Brussels, Paris, London, Nice, ISIS is blamed. So that doesn't need examination. The fact that we always get told it's the same culprits. And what I found remarkable is how quickly these so-called terrorists are identified. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that the person driving the van in Les Rambles yesterday was not of a particular ethnic background. And that does not mean I am saying Islam is to blame for this, or Islamic people, or ISIS, or anything else. What I'm saying is that for many, many years now, our governments have been using what you would call disenfranchised young men from the Middle East, from Islamic backgrounds, to manipulate, brainwash, and use and abuse them to suit our government's dirty needs. This has been happening since 9/11, if not before. Every single time, it's a young, Middle Eastern looking male who is blamed. Those young men, I fully believe, are as much victims as anybody else who is damaged by this. They are being used and abused by our governments, just as the people who are killed and injured and their families are also being used and abused by our governments. We are non-people. We don't matter. We ordinary people don't matter to those governments. And whilst we know perfectly well that the United States and the UK governments are quite happy to bomb Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and kill thousands and thousands and thousands of people in those countries in the name of their war. They don't admit to killing their own people, but that's what they do. And that's what these so-called terrorist acts are about. So to go back to the tragic events of yesterday, there were events in 3 places outside of Barcelona and 1 in the middle of Barcelona in Les Rambles. These events were, as far as I'm concerned, anticipated. On the day that the Catalan independence referendum date was announced, and that referendum is on the 1st of October, so a little over a month away, we talked about what to expect before this referendum. And bearing in mind the shenanigans and the things that happened in the lead up to the Scottish independence referendum of 2014, you could be reassured that Madrid would stop at nothing to make sure the referendum either was rigged or doesn't happen or anything to make sure Catalonia doesn't get independence. So on the day that this referendum, this farce of a referendum was announced, I thought to myself, there'll be a lot of dirty games, there'll be a lot of manipulation, lies, all sorts of things. We know the games they play. And the outcome of the referendum will be rigged, because Madrid will stop at nothing to prevent Catalan independence. And then, after the events of London, the so-called terrorist events of London earlier this year, and then the more recent events in Nice, I started thinking it's only a matter of time before Barcelona has an event, that something happens here. What I didn't do was put the 2 things together. I didn't actually think at that point in time that the referendum, whilst the run-up to it will be full of every trick in the book, I did not think of so-called terrorist attacks. Perhaps I should stop saying so-called terrorist attacks, because there are terrorists behind these attacks, and these terrorists are our governments. It's not the manipulated, disenfranchised youths or young men who are used to murder other people, innocent people. It's our governments, because they're the ones who engineer this. They're the ones behind it. So yesterday, when we heard this news, I thought, of course, this should have been obvious. But of course, you never see these things coming, do you? They happen where and when you least expect it. We were at Camp Nou a couple of weeks ago to watch Barca play, and at that time, I sat thinking, this is the beginning of the lead up to the referendum, and this would be a perfect place to target. But you can't stay at home and never leave your house just because you think something might happen. And of course you don't know where it's going to happen, so you have to get on with your life, and you don't dwell on these things. That's not a way to live your life. So when yesterday's events took place, it made sense. But what I have linked to this is events, I think it was 2 weeks ago, by a group here who claim to be anarchist, and their name is Arran. A-R-R-A-N, like the beautiful island of Arran in Scotland, but there is no connection between the Isle of Arran and Arran. Arran were held responsible for anti-tourist activity. Nobody was hurt. It was vandalism and it was visual, but not physical. And I saw some reports in some British rags saying that tourists aren't wanted here. This is the kind of welcome we're going to get here. And it was all taken a little bit out of proportion, because tourists are welcome here. Barcelona thrives on tourism. And without tourism, Barcelona would collapse. What isn't an attractive side of tourism is the drunkenness, the bad attitudes that you do get from some people. But the majority of tourists are well behaved, respectful, come here for a variety of reasons. It's a wonderful place to visit. Barcelona's a beautiful city. And there's the minority that give tourism a bad name. So the events of a couple of weeks ago from Arran slightly suggested this actually came from Madrid, because if you can whip up anti-tourism sentiment, you start to foster the idea that, the Catalans, they want independence. And they don't want tourists, And then you start to feed a slightly xenophobic point of view, which is wrong and it doesn't exist. So the Iran incident was one thing, but yesterday's incident added to my thoughts about this. Now, you may not agree with me, and I may have some things slightly inaccurate. I've spent a lot of time talking about this, reading about it, looking at newspaper reports, or media reports, I should say, from not just here in Catalonia, but all around the world. I've looked at British media, American media, Australian media, French media, Spanish media, and Catalan media. And the one thing which I find is common, but particularly from the Spanish media and the Spanish-driven media that exists in Catalonia, is that if everybody in this country stands united, that means Madrid and Barcelona stand united, they can defeat these terrorists. That speaks volumes. Mariano Rajoy has said this, and he has said this while he has Carles Puigdemont next to him, Ada Colau next to him, and Oriol Junqueras. Not physically next to him, only Puigdemont was physically next to him. But the message is clear. If we stand together, we won't let these Islamic terrorists beat us. So there's a lot of messages in that. First of all, it says, stay with us, Catalonia. We'll look after you. You'll be safer if you stay with us. Forget the ideas of independence. And Puigdemont, along with Rajoy, are collaborating. They're working together. And if, amongst the things that I have read about it, I don't speculate on this. I've got very clear views on the whole ISIS thing. It is a fabrication of our governments. I'm very, very firm on that. I have many Islamic friends. I have a lot of respect for them. I have respect for people from every race. I don't have a lot of respect for religion per se. I'm not religious. I don't believe in gods. But I do believe in compassion, equality, and justice. So, taking away the various discrepancies in reports about this incident, which happens every time we have one of these incidents, the numbers of people dead, the numbers of people injured, where it happened, why it happened, all of these different things. Although I have to say that all of the accounts I have read so far about yesterday's incidences tend to be unusually uniform. But the more interesting thing for me was I have read 11 totally separate and independent articles stating that the CIA warned the Barcelona police. Now the names that they report are slightly inaccurate because we have more than one police unit here, and so the names that are reported in all of these articles are slightly inaccurate, but the one that comes up the most is Mossos d'Esquadra. Now 11 separate reports saying the CIA knew this was going to happen, not necessarily yesterday, but months ago. They were warning Barcelona police that something was going to happen and that Les Rambles was going to be the place. So why did it happen? Why was this allowed to happen? And how many times do we hear this? That after an incident, we hear that in actual fact authorities knew about it. The reason, I fully believe the reason these events happened is to increase fear amongst people here, which it certainly will have done, to say to the world, Barcelona's not a safe place. And look, they want to go it alone. They think they can be independent. And yet, look, I fully believe these events are 100% linked to the upcoming referendum. It is no accident that this took place was roughly 6 weeks until the referendum. If these events had taken place much closer to the referendum, so let's say towards the end of September, it may have looked far too obvious. But to have it happen now at the height of the tourist season, by the end of September, the tourists they're still coming because they keep coming to Barcelona all year, but there's far less of them. The summer's finished. People have to go back to work, back to school, back to university. So there are far, far less of them. This was the perfect time to target Barcelona. The places that these incidences took place have some significance. Apart from the incident which took place at 5 o'clock on the Thursday afternoon, which was in Les Rambles near La Boqueria Market, which a lot of you people listening may well have visited. So you can picture exactly the place and how busy it is. So apart from that one, the other places also had some significance, and one of them is in northern Catalonia, and it's known as El Bressol de Catalunya. So the second place which is significant is a small town in northern Catalonia called Ripoll, and Ripoll is known as El Bressol de Catalunya, the cradle of Catalonia. That title in itself suggests its significance. You could equate that with, in Scotland, for example, Bannockburn, Arbroath, Scone, the very, very significant historical places. Now, this is a place where, coincidentally, one of the alleged suspects was detained. Of all the places, there are over 900 municipalities in Catalonia. I think there's 948. And out of them all, this man chose Ripoll, the cradle of Catalonia. A little bit of a coincidence. The other two places were coastal towns. One is the most southern town or place of population in Catalonia, a place called Alcanar. And Alcanar has got a very long history. It's a beautiful town. I've never been there. I've only looked at photographs of it, but it does look incredibly beautiful. It has a lot of Arabic history, and it's sort of cradled between, well, not between, because it comes at the end of Catalonia. You can look at a map yourself and see this, but it comes right at the bottom of Catalonia, and if you go inland from there, you come to Andalusia. And of course, Andalusia has got a very strong Arabic history. This goes back centuries to the Saracens and the Moors. This has nothing to do with ISIS. However, there have been damning reports which suggest that yesterday's incidences, of course, carried out by Islamic terrorists, are part of a plot to blame Andalusia for Arabic nation, which is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard. But it's believable because of the history. What these attacks were not. These attacks were not anti-tourism. Just because tourists were killed, tragically killed, and again, I know this is very, very raw, but my feelings about those innocent people yet again being caught up in our disgusting government war is incredibly sad. My feelings are incredibly sad. So this is not about anti-tourism. And as I just mentioned, it is not a plot by Islamics to reclaim Andalusia. It is a very obvious activity to screw up the referendum, to confuse Catalans, to suggest to the world that this should be part of Spain, they should not separate, that this is what so-called separatist countries, as they like to call us. Then you get suggestions of Northern Ireland, because that's what we get in Scotland. The minute you talk about separating, there are people who have such strong ideas about the word separatism. It's such a negative word. It has such negative connotations. This is what these activities will do. There are no extremist separatist groups in Catalonia. We know of ETA in the Basque Country, who have been blamed for events in the past which were not their doing. But there are no separatists like that here in Barcelona. Sorry, not in Barcelona, I mean in Catalonia. But Madrid would like nothing more than to make people believe that that's the case, that there are separatist groups, and that these separatist groups are prepared to kill innocent people to get independence. And that is so wrong, because that is so not the truth. The way to independence is not through violence. It's through UDI, and that does not have to be violent. In Scotland, when we talk about UDI, there are people who will frequently say, oh no, we don't want to be another Northern Ireland. And there are people here who don't want violence. Many, many people who don't want violence to get independence. And violence is not necessary to get independence. And of course, following these events now, the world, thanks to the media, and thanks to the political manipulation, the world now has sympathy for Spain. As the political leader of Spain, Mariano Rajoy has naturally been in the media a lot in the last 24 hours. He clearly isn't in favour of Catalan independence. He represents Spain. He represents a united country, and not a country that has autonomous regions that then decide to be independent. Mariano Rajoy, every time he has spoken about this, he emphasises time and time again, every single time, about being united and fighting the terrorists on a united front. He has also said on his Twitter account that one of the things he values is freedom. I fail to see how Mariano Rajoy can publicly state he values freedom when he and his government are responsible for denying millions of Catalan people their freedom. Madrid, like Westminster, will stop at absolutely nothing to prevent Catalans getting independence. The events of yesterday are still incredibly fresh, and sadly to say, I suspect there could be more events. We have 6 weeks before this referendum. One other aspect of this, which also featured in Nice and other places, is the fact that we are now seeing what we would call single vehicle terrorist attacks. And these are interesting, apart from the tragedy, the human tragedy, and innocent people being used as pawns in this disgusting business. But the interesting fact about this is that previously we would have things like suicide bombers, and I'm not referring to any particular instances when I say things like this, so I'm not suggesting 9/11 was suicide bombers. That's a whole other story, because there's a lot of interesting discrepancies in the so-called official version of 9/11. And of course the official versions never tell us anything, do they? So what we're seeing now, we're not seeing bombs. Yes, I know there was a house explosion yesterday, but we're not seeing bombs the way we used to. Or we're not seeing rampant, out of control terrorists with machine guns gunning down as many people as possible. We're seeing vehicles ploughing into people in specific places. And this is interesting because to make explosives, to make a bomb, don't get me wrong, I would have very little idea how to make a bomb. But I believe you can actually look this up on the internet. You can actually go online and you can find out how to make yourself a bomb. I grew up in the Northern Ireland years, so I vividly remember acts of terrorism that took place then, and there were things, homemade bombs that were used then, and they were often made from household products, lemonade bottles, soda bottles with chemicals that you find in most houses. But of course, that was a few years ago, and things have got a bit more sophisticated now. And now we have like remote control devices through mobile phones or detonators in cars. There's a whole lot of things, but you need some skills to do that. You need the preparation. You need the skills to do it. You need the skills to be able to ensure it works. And that requires a whole different level of preparation to make sure things go the way your bosses want them to go. Of course, media reports that the house explosion that took place yesterday was in a seaside coastal town in Catalonia called Cambrils, and there are, of course, newspaper reports, media reports saying, they were making a bomb and they accidentally let the bomb go off and it destroyed the house. And isn't it good that that bomb exploded and destroyed that house, because otherwise they would have used that in Les Rambles and that would have killed a lot more people. So because this bomb went off in the house, it saved people's lives. I don't buy that at all. I don't buy this. This is a very convenient way out. what happened in that house, whilst the official version links it directly, and they linked it really with the events that happened in Les Rambles later in the day, may have had nothing to do with it. It may have been a planned explosion in that house as a false flag. So, if you're going to use single vehicles for acts of terror, what do? You don't need to have anybody who's particularly skilled. You need to have somebody who's brainwashed, somebody who's got no family, somebody who's, as I said earlier, disenfranchised youth, who come from places, who come from countries where we have war, where we've damaged them. Disenfranchised youth. It's a bit like pedophiles groom their prey. It's disgusting. The people who groom these young men brainwash them like child soldiers. They become family. And so they are brainwashed into doing anything for that family. That the family is where their loyalty lies. And that family has very, very, very dark goals driven by our governments. And of course, our governments are not directly involved in this. They're not the ones that are sitting there saying to these disenfranchised young men, okay, now you're going to go out, you're going to find yourself a vehicle and you're going to drive it into hundreds of people in the middle of Barcelona and kill as many as possible. And then you either kill yourself or the police will certainly kill you. But you're going to sacrifice yourself and you're going to kill a lot of other people. No, our governments are well and truly removed, just as they are from the murder that takes place in Syria and Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. They're not the ones doing the dirty work. There's a long, 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 long chain of people before you get down to this basic level of the people who are doing the dirty work. And all they need to do for a single vehicle attack is what? Get hold of a vehicle. Obviously, you're not going to use a vehicle that's registered in your name, so you either steal one and remove the number plates, or you rent one with false identity. That's what happened yesterday. This white vehicle, which was used in Les Rambles, was a rented vehicle. It was rented in a town called Santa Perpetua de Mogoda, which, strangely enough, I know very well because I actually worked there for a year. It is a remote place. It's not in Barcelona. It's quite remote. And the vehicle was rented there. You can't rent something under false ID. That's not hard. You don't need any skills. All you need to do is be brainwashed, manipulated into believing that what you are about to do is correct. Perhaps you're on drugs. If you put somebody onto drugs, they will do anything. And it's not hard to imagine driving a vehicle out of control through hundreds of people without even knowing what they're doing. And the final thing about both the single vehicle attacks and the other types of so-called terrorist attacks that we hear about is that, doesn't it strike you as being somewhat odd that there's always identification found on the scene? As a friend said yesterday, gee, these terrorists must be really stupid. They always carry identification. And of course, yes, yesterday identification was found, which was why the authorities were able to track two men, apparently brothers. Who knows if those two men, if their names were real, if they genuinely were brothers. Who knows? We get told the official version, and the official version is never accurate. Never accurate. So the events of yesterday, to conclude, I think are incredibly sad. Barcelona is a beautiful city. I love living here. I'm integrated into the community. I love living here. In fact, I don't think I'd want to live anywhere else. So to give Barcelona a bad name like this, not just Barcelona but Catalonia, but this focuses on Barcelona because of the tourist side, and everybody knows Barcelona. Most people probably don't know the names of those other places. Most tourists don't venture too far from Barcelona. It's very, very sad to tarnish this city and this state, this dirty business. But, as we said at the beginning, and as I repeat over and over again, Westminster and Madrid will stop at nothing to make sure neither Scotland nor Catalonia ever get independence. And this is the final thing I'll say, so I'll be very brief. If either of those two colonial governments wanted us to have independence, we would have it by now. Both of our countries have mandates to declare independence. Nicola Sturgeon has one in Scotland, and Carles Puigdemont inherited one from Artur Mas here in Catalonia. And yet neither of them act upon them. Both of them talk about referendums, rigorendums. Neither of them are proactive in getting independence, which they both could do tomorrow. So these disgusting events that seem to be so common in modern society, I believe, are totally linked to the referendum. And finally, I know I said finally a few minutes ago, but this truly is finally, because I have to stop. This year was the 30th anniversary of the terrorist attack on the supermarket Ipacor in Barcelona. Now, I know David talked at great length about that some programs ago. I think he mentioned it in one of the English programs as well. Yes, he did. So if you were interested in that, go back to the previous programs and listen to his account of Ipacor. And it's no coincidence that yesterday happened. Thank you so much for listening again. Sobering thoughts. I sincerely hope my suspicion that something else will happen does never come true. I hope I am totally wrong. Absolutely wrong. And stay safe. Thanks for listening, and see you in September. Bye for now.
This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.
Good afternoon, I'm David Rabantos, and this is chapter 9 of Radio Hadrian, a chapter we'd rather not be doing. As you know, we come to you, whether you're in Scotland, Australia, America, or Catalonia, we come to you from Sant Andreu del Palomar in Barcelona. Barcelona that was hit this Thursday, 17th of August, in an attack that has costed, up to the moment we're talking, the life of 14 people, has 130 wounded in attacks, a bomb in Alcanar in the south of Catalonia last Wednesday, and a van going on a hit and run in Rambles, a very central point in Barcelona that a lot of people that are listening to us must have visited. Finally, to top it up, there was a shootout at night in Cambrils where other people were stabbed. Another person died. That's the one that makes number 14. 13 had died in Ramblas during that day. And the 5 supposed to be terrorists were shot down. And that's what we can talk, or what we can say up to this moment. As I say, we shouldn't be doing this program because, as you know, we were taking a break. But then we realized that we owe it to our city. I've been born in Barcelona. I've lived my whole life in Barcelona. I love Barcelona. I'm determined to collaborate with a lot of people to make Catalonia, to make Barcelona the capital of the independent country of Catalonia. And we are hurt. And we're a bit damaged. But we're not scared. And not being scared, it does not only mean we're not scared. The people of Barcelona on Friday midday at 12, thousands of them gathered in Plaça Catalunya, very close to where the main attack happened. And in the square that might be the equivalent to George Square in Glasgow, thousands of Catalans were shouting, "No tenim por," or "we're not scared." And it's a moment not to be scared, but not only not to be scared of attacks that might bring us down, but also we don't need to be scared of the truth. And the truth is that most certainly we're in front of a false flag attack, as it was already in Barcelona, where 40 people were killed in 1987, as we commented in chapter 3, Radio Hadrian, as 200 people were killed in Madrid in a false flag attack in 2004, and as we had forewarned more than 2 years ago, we knew there was going to be an attack in Barcelona, because Catalonia is moving towards independence, regardless of the fact that all our leaders work for the enemy to avoid we have it. But the people of Catalonia has been on the doors of independence for years. So an attack was on everybody's provision, so we knew it was happening. But this moment, and with pain in our hearts, but we thought that what we could do first, it was to pay an homage to the people who died in Barcelona and Cambrils, and to the people wounded, and the people in shock, and to everybody who was affected. And the way to pay homage was to help the truth come out, and that's what we hear. I would also like to give thanks to the wonderful people in the city of Barcelona who has come in drones to give blood, the taxi drivers working for free to help people, people bringing people to their homes to help, the people in hospitals, police, people in emergency services, people in public transport. It's an amazing city, and it's a privilege to live in this wonderful city and surrounded by these people who've come out of their way to minimize the impact in our city. So homage to the people that died, and a big hug for their families and friends. And thanks to everybody who has made us realize how wonderful the people in this city is. But that said, our obligation, our moral obligation, is to do what nobody is gonna be saying in Catalonia these days. And we have to lay out why we know for sure it's a false attack first and now, and I feel entitled to say it because had this been in Madrid, if I was telling about how conscious we should be about countries suffering what we've suffered in Barcelona every day, they every day have a Barcelona in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Yemen, in so many other places. Just this week in Ouagadougou, the capital city in Burkina Faso, had an attack where 18 people died. There's people dying everywhere in the world with violence. And it's normal for us to be affected because now it's people in our city. People from 34 different nations, because in Ramblas it's a terrain that has been conquered by tourists, so hardly a Catalan ever enters there anymore. But 34 different nationalities have been hit by this, and that's probably why it was chosen to do it there. But we are on the verge of a referendum that probably won't happen. People listening to these programs already know that referendums don't bring independence. Only UDI will bring independence. So, but we knew something was going to happen, because that's how false flag attacks, that's how the New World Order happens. They wanted to invade Iraq and Afghanistan, so they did 11th of September to have an excuse to do that. They wanted to enter Second World War, but people was against it, so they let Pearl Harbor happen, and so on and so forth. They wanted to enter a war with Vietnam, so they invented the incident in the Gulf of Tonkin, which when documents were they passed their secret time, it was clear that it wasn't. And the Nazis invented a false flag attack in Gleiwitz, I think is the name, in a radio station. They put people dressed as Polish people who killed the people there. Then these people were killed, and that was used as an excuse for Nazi Germany to invade Poland. So it's false flag attacks are as old as the world, and we knew it was coming. We knew it so much that the CIA commented to the Catalan police 2 months ago that there was going to be an attack and that it would be in Rambla. So they're not Nostradamus, they're not fortune tellers, they are the people who's behind the attacks. That's how they know. That reminds me on how Susan Lindauer, that I feel like close to, because she was put and said that she was mentally insane, so her opinions wouldn't count in the case of 9/11. Well, it's the same thing they did to me, as you know. they put me in a mental ward, so my opinions on Catalan politics and Scottish wouldn't count. Well, she was told in advance not to go to New York, and she knew before it happened that there were going to be attacks in the Twin Towers using planes. Well, how did they know? Because they planned it themselves. If somebody said, I think this woman is gonna be murdered in certain park next month, and then next month that woman gets murdered in precisely the park that person had said, well, he would be the main suspect, wouldn't he? He said it would happen, and then it happened. So how did you know? Because you are the one who does it. Welcome to the New World Order. And specifically the case here, it's shown, as we said before, in chapter 3 we explained how in Hypercore 1987, and I won't bore you with all that, but if you want to come back to chapter 3, you'll see how more than 40 Catalans died in Hypercore, where the warnings were not heeded, where it was supposed to be ETA, that we know that was in part of Gladio operation in the 80s, where NATO was operating murder squads in 15 countries. And it was after the Basque had got tremendous results here, so it didn't make sense. And the explosives used there were explosives only used by NATO. So, false flag attack in Hypercore supermarket in 1987 with 40 dead, but most Catalans still don't know the truth. Secondly, we know 9/11. 9/11 would deserve a full program, but we know that they were already undergoing plans to invade Afghanistan, so they needed something big to justify the invasion of Afghanistan. That had to happen before Afghanistan froze, so they needed something happening in September, so something happened in September, and the Afghan war happened. And there's an increase in the production of drugs in Afghanistan after that, which a lot of better informed people than me know that is controlled by the CIA, and the revenues produced from drug deals I used to pay for other undercover operations, but we'll go in depth with that another day. But the last big attack, also assigned to Al-Qaeda, was in Madrid 2004, and the truth has been hidden from Spaniards as well. Because after the NATO had an exercise where people were set free inside Madrid, from the 6th to the 10th of March 2004, well, bang, it's supposed to be a drill to avoid terror attacks, and then bang, the next day, the biggest terror attack ever to happen in Spain. That's it. It happens the day after, and they make every evidence disappear, like they did with 9/11. They dispose of the wagons. Evidence was planted, as we explained in due time, and the explosive used again is military C4, I think it is, which is only military use. So then again, it was a false flag. It was a false flag to guarantee that George Bush would be re-elected. And now it's Barcelona, on the edge of independence, only a few days after coup, which are supposed to be an independence party, had an incident with a touristic bus just 10 days ago. If we want tourists, not so much tourists, whatever. But this little incident has been blown out of proportion in the English press. And then only a few days after that, it happens, a terror attack in Barcelona. So my impression is that the British press was blowing this out of proportion as a preparation of what they knew it was going to happen. And that is when the most scummy part of the thing comes. Well, first, they immediately, you know how it goes. They find a van, and you know how it goes. So a passport is found that serves to identify. They immediately say that Islamic State has accepted it, but then they twist things. Because Islamic State says that they want to hit Spaniards, and it happens that Catalonia is on the verge of independence, so we're not Spanish. But not only that, which could be considered debatable, but the big thing is we are on the verge of breaking a NATO state member. And NATO is supposed to be the enemy of Islamic State. So only because they've been mashing our brains to a pulp can anybody of sane mind think that the so-called enemies of NATO would attack NATO by hitting Barcelona. Yeah, it doesn't hold water. And we've seen media who've been correcting that, because as the truth sayers, we have been exposing that it wouldn't work, it doesn't work, and then Catalan television has changed. Instead of publishing the WhatsApps where Islamic State were saying that they want to hit Spaniards, but they changed it for they want to hit Barcelona. So the obvious fake and mistake that proves its full flag, it's hidden. So then we have it here. They were going to do an attack. We have Margallo, the former foreign minister of Spain, saying that things would start happening in Barcelona from August. And then, well, he was also a fortune teller, or Nostradamus, because he got it very right. Some years ago, José María Aznar, possibly the most hated former president of Spain by the Catalans, and now presently in the board of direction of Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, said before Spain breaks, Catalonia will break. And certainly Catalonia has been broken this week, isn't it? So they've been telling us, they've been mocking us, and now it has happened. And the reasons for this to happen, now I want to go to give some names that might sound alien to you, but I'll clarify this. They're trying to link violence with independence, and that is because the frame couldn't be more perfect. The first person to be taken into this, he was taken in Ripoll, as Deli has said. That's named the cradle of Catalonia because of two things. There it's where Guifré el Pilós, Wilfred the Hairy, died in Ripoll. He is the founding father of Catalonia. It's a bit mythic and legendary because the coat of arms, the flag of Catalonia is supposed to be with a French king or representative put the hand in his chest, because he was dying precisely. Moors or Arabs were around Catalonia at that time, and he died in an Arab attack, and on his dying blood, the four fingers are supposed to be on his blood, and that's why the Catalan flag has 4 bars. So that's in Ripoll. And also there is where Abat Oliva, which was a bishop in Ripoll as well, and a not very big place, so a lot of history there. Delia has given some examples that could be comparable in Scotland. I wouldn't know which to choose. Abat Oliva, apart from being a humanist which translated Arab texts into Latin, but he's important because he is a peace and human rights maverick or pathfinder, because he invented Asambleas de Pau y Treva, in which truce were given according to certain days, and certain categories of people like unarmed clergy or women or certain categories couldn't be attacked. And this was taken internationally later in Nice and Narbonne. So he is supposed to be somebody who has brought peace, and he's an image of peace, and these two are in Ripoll. So I'm not strong on symbolism. I don't do these number things or why things happen on certain date. But if the plan is to send a very powerful subliminal message to link Catalonia and terrorism or Islamic integrism, whatever, well, chances again, and mathematics also are conspiring again. There's 948 municipalities in Catalonia, 948. And the one that is more associated with Catalonia and has the name of Cradle of Catalonia is only one, and it's Ripoll. And it happens to be where this person is apprehended. Well, if you were a film writer, script writer, you couldn't choose it better, could you? So we don't buy into it, and certainly when you've been denouncing things, you don't buy into it. But the thing that it was planned and that a lot of people knew is in several examples I will go to, and I'll try not to change it because it's names. So these names that are linked to the bigger picture. a lot of people had been trying to take advantage of this. And that could only be immoral or miserable, or these people might be people that needs to be looked down upon. But if it only was that. But here, people in Radio Hadrian, and I hope people listening to us, and I hope we grow to millions, and I hope we go and change this world. We don't believe in coincidence, and we don't believe in mainstream media, do we? And we don't believe in things being the way they tell us. And can you imagine how difficult it will become when so-called terrorists stop having their passports made of indestructible material in their mouth when they go to do an attack? Something that serves for us always. We always find these passports everywhere, and then in 10 minutes they're identified and we know they're jihadists and everything is solved. Can you imagine when the instructor goes on pension and they put somebody very professional who tells them to do the contrary? Bang, that's going to be the end of our secret services solving things so soon, isn't it? But I'm going to go into some people that are related to the big picture, and so you can understand. There's been a lot of Spaniards taking advantage politically for this. And the main one is Mariano Rajoy. Mariano Rajoy is the president of Spain. You know, Catalonia is trying to break free. Mariano Rajoy came to Barcelona and used the word unity, together, better together, we have to stay together, whatever. Rajoy, you are mean. You're a bad person. You're a bad politician. We already knew you are incapable. We already knew you're corrupt. We already knew you're a liar. But now you know you're despicable. You're miserable. You're a worthless person. You don't do politics on the warm bodies of dead people. Okay, so you're taking political advantage. And you didn't avoid this happening. It's very funny because you say, we are stronger. If we're stronger, we can avoid these things. Well, sorry, but we were Spanish when this happened. So we already know how it works for us Catalans, the protection of Spain. So thanks, but no thanks. We're going our own way. Apart from him, somebody called Luis Basset, who till yesterday I had in my friends list, he's the director of El País in Catalonia. And he linked and he said, well, this is the end of frivolous things about independence, and then we can focus on real problems. So then another one who's taking political advantage on deaths. But the question is more serious than that, because El País, a newspaper that also participated in the great charade and shenanigans of passing WikiLeaks as a defender of the rights in the world, when we know it's the contrary. It was one of the 5 media. Well, El País happens to be run by Juan Luis Cebrián. Well, surprise, surprise, Juan Luis Cebrián is the only permanent seat in the Bilderberg Club, which is not very prone on Catalan independence. So we have an attack which has all the makings of a false flag attack, and we have the director in Catalonia trying to take political advantage from somebody in a newspaper that's run by a Bilderberg member. But not only that, but the journalist Cristina Martín Jiménez, a couple of years ago, told us in so many words that Bilderberg, and it was expressed through Javier Solana, which was former chief officer of NATO, don't want Catalan independence, and will use this to bring down to federal Spain and a change of constitution, all done under the cover, under the table, and that will be it. So we have a newspaper taking advantage of an attack, and they're linked to Bilderberg, who has already expressed they don't want Catalan independence. I mean, if it walks like a duck, looks like a duck, and quacks, it is a duck. But linked to El País as well, none other than Herman Tertsch. Herman Tertsch has also linked independence and the attack. Herman Tertsch, well, we cannot blame somebody by his father's guilt, but we have to assume that it's somebody that has certain peculiarities. He has worked for 22 years at El País, which is the newspaper we said that has Bilderberg links, so that's already one. But Hermann Tertsch's father was an Austrian Nazi with relevant parts in Hitler's regime, and he escaped the Allies dressed as a Catholic priest. And he then had some newspaper linked to Franco in Spain. So we're talking about somebody not really democratic. Well, he has mocked and he has linked independence to the attack. But Herman Tertsch it's not only that. I mean, Herman Tertsch is somebody who did a tweet some time ago saying that Lluís Companys was the elected Catalan president that was handed to the Nazis by the French in 1940 and was executed, murdered by Franco regime. Well, Herman Tertsch, that person in the not very exact sense of the term, he said that Lluís Companys is one of the few things that can be acceptable from Franco time. So he finds that shooting a democratically elected president is right. Herman Tertsch, another enemy of Catalonia. Then third, we have another one who has linked independence and jihadist attacks, is none other than Antonio Bolaños. Antonio Bolaños was formerly the chief of press, the spokesman of Montilla, was Catalan president, and is famous for having had a tiff with journalists saying, if you keep doing that, I'm gonna, and I cannot say the word, but it's a very bad sounding word, means I'm gonna destroy your career. And then there was a big scandal, and he has had several scandals like that. This, another person, Antonio Bolaños, another enemy of the truth, of journalism, of ethics. He happens to be in the editorial board of Crónica Global, which is a digital newspaper that is very against Catalan independence, which happens to have been a place where Stephen Bergen, ex-writer in The Scotsman, has already written. Stephen Bergen is the guy that set up Catalonia Today with the Catalan president Puigdemont. So, as you see, it all runs in the family. And last but not least, well, this Stephen Bergen is somebody capable of saying that Catalan independentists are xenophobes. And he used the example of this guy from Partido Popular, which happens to be very against independence. So we have The Guardian, The Scotsman, Stephen Bergen, Catalan president, an ex-Nazi, Bilderberg, Crónica Global, all Mariano Rajoy from PP, all together taking advantage of the attacks. Well, I don't believe in coincidence. So if you have an attack and a lot of people are taking advantage of it, these powerful people we've said, well, I don't believe it's an accident. And then finally, well, it's linked to The Guardian, and then we mentioned PP. Well, the PP in Alella has disgraced itself, saying, oh, the attack, you know, this is what happens when you talk about independence. That's lower than low. How can you try to take advantage, try to get a bunch of votes on the death of 14 people? That's not acceptable. And that's why we don't need you royals, we don't need you Spanish politicians, we don't need you Spanish media, because you're behind this. Because you know that the Catalan people want independence after 300 years of genocide on your hands. And we know it's false flag, and we're gonna stand here and we're gonna prove it. And the only way to stop these things happening is to open our eyes. If Catalans didn't believe 9/11 was 19 amateurs directed from a cave in Afghanistan by an old guy with dialysis, and they didn't believe that the same thing happened in Madrid 2004, they wouldn't be able to keep murdering us. And we know that the CIA spread this thing about conspiracy theories. Well, conspiracies exist. And yes, I'm a conspiracy theorist. So what? I'm a conspiracy theorist because I think freely, because I don't believe what they tell me in mainstream media, because I'm not scared of finding inconvenient truth, because I'm gonna fight whatever it takes to change these truths. And because by changing these truths, we're going to declare independence in Catalonia and Scotland, and we're going to build a better world. Let's do this. Guanyarem. To do that,
This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.